I went to see this film last night with the plan to cover it next week. But after seeing it, I couldn't help myself. I need to talk about this film. First off, why is no one talking about this film? Like, check the beats per minute. This is so far the scariest film to come out in 2024 that I have seen. It's scarier than Immaculate, Late Night with the Devil, The Last Omen, or Brahma Yugam. Um, it's scary. This is a scary film. The first two-thirds of this film scared the absolute hell out of me. I'm talking full goosebumps. Hell, doing the play-by-play for my girlfriend in the kitchen this morning gave me goosebumps when I started talking about certain scenes. Now, I will state that Korean horror it just fucking does something to me. I just love it. Out of my top probably 20 horror films, I think 5 of them are Korean. I Saw the Devil, The Wailing, Gonjiam, Train to Busan, Old Boy. I fucking love all of these movies, and almost all of them scare the soul out of me, which leads me to believe that Korean writers and directors have like this needle-like precision of getting into my limbic system and freaking me out in all the right ways. And the director of this, Jang Jae-hyun, does it with this one. I'm shocked. I'm shocked this hasn't gotten more attention, especially given some of the horror trash that's been shoveled our way this year, like Night Swim or Imaginary. Like, this movie should be getting hype just for the fact that it's scary as shit. The first two-thirds are scary as all hell. Exhuma is a Korean occult folk horror. If you like this movie, if you like the movie The Wailing, A Dark Song, or The Autopsy of Jane Doe, this should be at the top of your watch list. It has aspects of all of them, and it does it well. Am I saying it's as good as those films? No. Those movies are like 10 out of 10 masterpieces, as far as I'm concerned. But for most of this film's runtime, it is doing occult folk horror as good, or in some cases better, than those films do. Right? It just takes a bit of a turn at the end that drops it a little bit, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't give it the time of day. The best, you know what it's like? It's like so. Let's say you love the video game Bloodborne, right? You play the hell out of it. You love it. It's awesome. One of your favorites. And then you finish it and it hits you. There is no more Bloodborne for you to play. Like, it's done. They're not doing any more DLCs. They're not doing any sequels. That's it. There's no more Bloodborne. So you wait years with this like Bloodborne-sized itch bubbling away at the back of your brain. Then, years later, a game comes out called Lies of P. Now, it's not as good as Bloodborne, because Bloodborne's like a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but it's almost as good as Bloodborne, like maybe an 8 out of 10. And it scratches the same itch, which is the important bit. It scratches the same itch. This movie is like that for The Wailing. Like, I loved The Wailing. It's one of the greatest films I have ever seen. I have a Wailing tattoo planned for some time in the near future. Not many folk horrors have come close to The Wailing since its release in 2016 for me. But for most of this film's runtime, it is up there with The Wailing. Like, it is dark, it is moody, it is in parts funny, and most of all, it's fucking scary. It's scary. It has a really engaging occult mystery. It establishes these massive swaths of Korean folklore, religion, and history, and it probably has the best ritual scene I have seen in a horror film ever. I think ever. Maybe tied with A Dark Song, but like, it's like, if you like ritual horror, I think it might be the best ritual scene ever. It is full on. And if you're a little lorehound like I am, this movie will make you want to do your homework and dive in with both feet. Like, I've learned so much about feng shui, burial rites in Korea, the military, and I think the best occult folk horrors sort of do that. They make you want to go and investigate further. And I enjoyed the hell out of this one. In Exhuma, a duo of shamans, Wa Rim, played by Kim Go-Eun, and Bong Gil, played by Lee Do-hyun, are hired by a wealthy Korean family in America called the Parks to investigate why their child has been targeted by like an angry paranormal force. Upon arriving, the shamans quickly deduce that the family has become the subject of a deadly phenomenon called a graves calling, which is basically when an ancestor is unhappy with their burial plot and decides to throw the mother of all tantrums. As they've been promised like a fucking truckload of money, they reach out to some former associates, a feng shui expert called a geomancer in this, played by god of Korean cinema, Choi Min-sik, and his mortician buddy, Jang Jae-hyun, played by Yo Hae-jin. Now, they make plans to visit the ancestor's secluded burial site. They exhume the body and they want to perform a cleansing ritual. However, when they arrive, they suspect that there's more to the park's legacy than they know or are willing to let on. And what follows is a chilling, creepy, mystic little jaunt through the history and lore of South Korea. And it's fucking great. Check out the trailer.
미국에 좀 이상한 집안에 다녀왔거든요. 밑도 끝도 없는 뭐 그냥
부자예요?
시작이 좋네. 내가 한 40년 땀 파먹고 살았지만 여긴 도저히 모르겠다. 박정우 씨 우리한테 뭐 숨기는 게 있죠?
대살구슬해보죠.
유세차임이 한기가 엄청나네. 아, 이게 무슨 말이야? 파괴됐다니. 애들 다 죽어.
This movie is really good. I shouldn't even really have to say that because it's got Choi Min-sik in it. If you don't know who that is, it's the main guy in Old Boy. He plays one of the best villains of all time in cinema for me. Zhang in I Saw the Devil. And with those two performances under his belt, he doesn't have to do anything more with his life. Like, he is... Thank you so much. Like, he has gifted us these two performances already. But, out of the kindness of his sweet little Korean heart, he jumps into this creepy little procedural and acts his fucking ass off as a badass feng shui expert. There is a scene where he tastes the soil from a grave and just turns to the group and says, I'm out, like, I'm not doing this. And because I know him and because I believe him and trust him so much, they make you instill so much trust in him as an expert, it freaked me out. Like, I was like, guys, we should talk about this before we go any further. Like, that's how good he is in this. And not to be outdone, Kim Go-Eun as the shaman, she brings her own style of like badass energy as someone who is super young and cool, but also having this really deep knowledge and connection to Taoism and the occult. She does this magnificent ritual performance that steals the show for me, and she does it in full traditional regalia and then connies. Yes, she rocks white Chuck Taylors while dancing with knives and like shrieking like a banshee, and it just perfectly illustrates the mix of tradition and modernity that makes up this group of experts. Like, the shamans sort of look like hip fitness influencers, and like the tats on Bon Gill are just fucking, they're so badass, they look so good. And it's a great little group to follow. Like, they're an interesting group, they're an interesting mix of people. The cinematography is haunting but beautiful, as is common to most Korean cinema. When you get to the gravesite, it is so lush and it's got these amazing vistas over North Korea. But it also has this really off-putting energy straight away. You pick up on it immediately. So shout out to cinematographer Lee Mo-gai, who also apparently did The Tale of Two Sisters, which I haven't seen, but it's apparently awesome. Also, the score is quite subtle at parts. They allow for dead silence when the movie wants you to focus on something else, like the rituals being performed or the accompanying instruments being played. And then when there's like a travel scene or whatever, it picks back up into these really ominous tunes, and they do that to like build the tension. So by the time you're at the next scene, the tension's up here already. It's so clever, guys. It's so clever. You can legitimately hear the weight of the raindrops in this movie when it's raining. Like there's lots of digging in this movie. They're exhuming bodies. You can hear the shovel slicing into the ground. It's just the sound design is so good. Also, like I said before, this movie, it's scary as hell. Like there are multiple scenes that gave me goosebumps and creeped me out. Not just jump scares though. Like they use all of your senses. Fuck. There is this one scene where an entity gains access to a house. I'm trying to be spoiler free. And the sound that this thing makes after it gets into the house, I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it. It's so fucking unpleasant. It's just a creepy little film. For the first 2/3 of this movie, it does what all good Korean horror does in not showing you too much of the entity so that you can get accustomed to it. It gives you these scenes that are creepy, but they're also like unusual. Like there's something, all the scary scenes in this, there is something unusual about them. You know what I mean? It's not just like open the mirrored bathroom cabinet and something's behind you. Like we've seen all that shit before. All the creepy stuff in this is doing something weird that I haven't seen before. And that really helps to establish the lore, and it makes you feel for the characters, which is like, that's the mix you want in your horror. Now, unfortunately, in the last third of the movie, it does drop off a bit because they show you too much of the entity. Like they just start, he's in every scene. And that sort of makes it lose a bit of mystique, and therefore the fear of the unknown that goes along with it. I sort of liken it to how in No One Will Save You, it was amazing for 2/3, and then it becomes a less interesting film in the last third. It's sort of like that. This does dip into a bit of a sort of like creature feature slasher. It's good. It's just not as good as the first 2/3. Like the first 2/3 had me in. Every piece of action by the shamans and the entity is like drenched in lore and religious practices, so it all works. I just prefer my spooky occult horror to my like straight up monster flicks. There's also somewhat dodgy CGI, but it's for animals, and I'd much prefer that than using real animals, so I'm cool with it. But don't let that deter you. I'm telling you, this film is fucking hella scary, and it's well worth your time if you like occult and folk horror. It's a crime that it's been buried in the Western world because it's so like mysterious and spooky, and it makes you want to investigate, and I really like that about it. I recommend watching this if you love occult and folk horror, which is my favorite type of horror. You know, like the films that make you want to do your homework. They want you're on Google, you're on Wikipedia, you're watching YouTube videos afterwards. Like that's what this film made me want to do. If you love Korean horror films, especially when they star the big man himself, Min-sik. If you've been begging to be scared by something this year, like I've loved a lot of films this year, but none of them have really like scared me. This scared me. This fucking scared me. If you're looking for scares, I reckon this will do it. I don't recommend watching this if you struggle with subtitles. I know some people do. It's hard to focus on like the bottom of the screen and the top of the screen. I get it. This is a subtitled film. If you don't like supernatural horror, I know some people that don't. They prefer like slashers or true crime. Stay away from this one. Supernatural. If ritualistic animal harm is a trigger for you, there is lots of it in here. They do a lot of rituals. There's lots of various animal bloods, you know, lots of painting of runes, that sort of shit. So be warned. But all in all, I had an absolute ball being spooked by this film. Like if you like Asian horror or Korean horror in general, go in. You will not be mad that you watch this. It's got all the right intrigue and rituals to keep you engaged all the way through. I loved it. I really did. I really liked it. If you did watch this and you want more like it, I highly recommend The Wailing if somehow you haven't seen it. It is on like my Mount Rushmore of folk horror, which is, once again, as I said, it's my favorite brand of horror. If you have seen The Wailing and you want more like meticulous occult stuff, check out A Dark Song. The whole movie is basically one long ritual scene, and it's an overlooked horror gem. If you are Korean and you know more horror movies that I should get around, let me know. Chuck them in the comments. Like, I am always looking for recommendations for Korean horror. I love Korean horror. And I know, I Saw the Devil and The Wailing and Train to Busan are all the ones that get bandied around. But if there's some smaller ones that you're like, hey, you didn't mention this one, let me know, because I can't get enough of it. I love Korean horror. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all next week. Peace.